Hello and welcome to Innovation Celebration, the show where we celebrate recent advancements in science and technology, the people and ideas that make them possible, and the ways in which they enhance human flourishing. I'm Thomas Walker-Worth.
And I'm Angelica Walker-Worth, and today we are going to talk about cryptocurrency. It's a very interesting technology that some people understand very well and some of us not so much, and we fall in the not so much category. So we've invited our lovely friend Felix Hosse. Felix is from Germany, and he is a co-founder of the Berlin Center for Individualist Thought. He also works with the Blockchain Founders Group and is on a podcast called Crypto Calling. So we can leave links to that in the description if you guys are interested. But thank you so much for joining us, Felix.
Thank you guys for having me.
All right, so let's start very basic, right? For those of us who don't understand crypto very well. How exactly does cryptocurrency have actual value that people can use to trade?
All right, so let us go back a little bit. So first, I think that we have to understand what cryptocurrency actually is. And another word for cryptocurrencies, or like the blockchain technology in this case, is DLT. So a decentralized ledger technology. And I think this gives you a pretty good picture of what is actually going on. So on a blockchain, like you can imagine, cryptocurrencies like a decentralized network. So not like our banking system, which is pretty centralized, where there are the nodes, which are the banks, and you basically interact through your banks. A decentralized network has different nodes. Those are scattered around the world, and they are used to process payments. For those payments, you can like in any cryptocurrency. Let's, for example, for those who are kind of into it already, the most popular one is currently Bitcoin. And each coin, or each little part of a coin, in Bitcoin's case it would be Satoshis, has a number, so it has an identifier to it. Let me hold up a piece of actual fiat currency here. This is a 10 euro bill, and you could see right here there's a serial number. This serial number it's pretty much akin to the identifier that is on each cryptocurrency. Since it's a decentralized network, there is no entity which basically controls where each unit of currency is currently, but every single node keeps track of the transactions which is performed with each unit of currency. So with each Bitcoin, with each like little Satoshi, which is like the subunit. So then you always have to ask, if you ask for the value of cryptocurrencies, you always have to ask, okay, what is the value of its specific features? And the features compared to, for example, fiat currency, is decentralization, and that there's more safety. There is no central point of failure. If you look at banks, you could have a bank hack. In the old days, you could always have like a bank heist at times. That would be a central point of failure. Someone would go in, steal your money, and you return to the bank and it's like, where's my money? And they say, oh, it's stolen. In a blockchain network, that doesn't really work because there is no single point of attack. You would have to attack all the different nodes. So decentralization is a major point of where the value of cryptocurrencies come in. A more modern day example of where centralization is very useful is the current monetary policy. Currently, you have an expansion in the amount of money which is in circulation. This is done through the central banks and through the way that money is created. And the more units of new currency, like of currencies, are created, the more it devalues the purchasing power of each already existing unit. So if you hold money in your bank account, it gets devalued over time. And if you, for example, hold cryptocurrencies which have a limited supply, like, for example, Bitcoin has a 21 million limit in terms of how many Bitcoin can ever be created. There you do not have this inflation, which leads me to the second advantage, which is just Bitcoin as a store of value. You can hold it and you can transact with it, and it will not lose value to the rate that fiat currencies do currently.
Cool. So you have, talk about the distributed ledger. You've got all these different people maintaining copies of the entire ledger. That kind of opens two questions in my mind. One is, how do they agree with each other, or if there's a disagreement, how do you work that out? And the other is, doesn't everyone have a copy of every transaction you've made? Therefore, what's the implication of that for privacy?
All right. Let me start with the first problem. There always has been a very interesting problem in mathematics and cryptography, which is the Byzantine generals problem. Imagine the Byzantine army, and it lays siege to a city. This city, the army is basically controlled by, like, it's divided in different units, and each unit is controlled by a general. Those guys have now to communicate on the course of action. The problem is that they have to coordinate by messages, and they cannot do that like simultaneously. Another additional problem is that you have that there are worries that there might be traitors among them. So how do you basically then coordinate the attack? The same problem is in the blockchain. How do you coordinate nodes which some might actually send faulty information? And the blockchain does that quite elegantly. It has what's called a mining process. In the mining process, it has the different nodes verifying transactions. So what they basically verify is they go through each transaction, which basically lands there. So if you want to do a transaction, you submit it there, and it gets distributed to all the nodes, and they check a couple of parameters, which is the amount of currency actually in your wallet? Like, do you have that much? Does it get double spent? Because double spent is in digital currencies, that's a huge problem, right? If you can only spend money once, otherwise it would lose all its value. And is it within the limits of the 21 million? Those are just a couple of parameters they check. And what they then do is they have what in blockchain, like in Bitcoin, what is called a proof of work concept. So they check everything and they solve mathematical problems, which is called a hash puzzle. The hash puzzle is an operation. You have to basically what you have to do as a node, you have to supply calculation power. So that could be like by computing power. And what it does is, like, a hash function is, now it gets a little technical. It's a mathematical function which basically assigns a block a unique identifier, which is called the hash. And by solving a hash is different to usual mathematical functions, because usual mathematical functions can be inverted, so they work in both ways. If you solve, for example, a multiplication problem, you can invert it and get back to the initial state by division. This is not possible through a hash function. It only works in one way. So what it does, it takes all the variables, all the transactions which land at the node, basically transcribes them into a function, and there are some factors in there which are unknown, and you basically have to try different numbers through brute force. This leads to a situation like, once the block is solved, it has an unique identifier, but you cannot go back and from the unique identifier see what is, like, you cannot reverse engineer it. This is important because that way you make it very, very safe through towards outside attacks, and you cannot change anything which is currently on the blockchain. So this is how decentralization works. Otherwise we would have a centralized actor, and this actor would be responsible for keeping records. And this way, we're having these blocks solved. And once they're solved, they get into, the block is solved, and then it gets part of the blockchain. This is why it's called the blockchain, right? And each block has, in the hash, there's certain information, which is basically translation of all the transactions which were in the block and a reference towards the block before. So therefore, you can always see, all right, this block follows this one. And if you, for example, change anything of this hash, the rest of the chain gets basically, like, the chain then is broken, and you would see, all right, there was a breach. So this is like a safety mechanism in there. I hope this was not too technical.
No, I just have one question on that. So you're talking about the people doing the solving. Who are these actors, or is it done electronically? And if so, who manages that?
It's done electronically.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's basically anybody can set up a node, a Bitcoin node. And it's actually very important that there are such people who have, who operate those nodes, because that way you secure the network. You basically want to raise the cost of, interfering with the blockchain. And you do that by those very, complex complex calculations. And the more power you need, the more to do that, the more secure the blockchain gets in and of itself. Mm-hmm. And yeah, you can set that up on completely by yourself privately, but the days when private individuals could mine it are, I would say, over, because you need much more computing power, because you're in a constant competition to be the fastest to do those calculations.
And what's the advantage of being the fastest then? Sorry.
The fastest gets a reward. It's a mining reward, and it gets this reward through Bitcoin. This is also the way how in Bitcoin, this is the way that new Bitcoins are created.
Up to that limit of 21 million.
Up to the limit, yes.
Right, and that's also part of trying to speed up the transaction processing speed, isn't it? Because I know that's been an issue in the past. The amount of computing power required to solve each step of the chain slows down transaction speed and harms its.
Yeah, the complexity, and also the amazing thing is that the complexity can also be, to a certain degree adjusted. So that's.
Does that mean that when you hit that limit, at least in the case of Bitcoin, there won't be any more mining at that point?
There would not be any more mining, and you might say, well, where's the incentive for those miners to then keep going? There is, however, some transaction fees, which they also get awarded for mining that particular block. So there are two components in which miners make money. One is currently the mining of the new Bitcoin, and the others are transaction fees, which will always be there.
Right.
Gotcha.
Cool. And then that sort of just leads to my other question, which I really probably shouldn't have tacked onto the first question, which is just, if your entire activity is on this public ledger that everyone can see, is there not the risk that if somebody gets your unique identifier, they can see everything you've ever done?
Yes. This is the danger. And this is also why Bitcoin is not anonymous. It's pseudonymous. Yeah, that might be the English word. It's pseudonymous because it's basically, it gives you all the information connected to a certain wallet, which is the way that you hold crypto and you hold Bitcoin in this way. And if someone connects your identity to that wallet, then you are basically very transparent. Your transaction history is transparent.
So it might be.
However, there are other cryptocurrencies which are completely anonymous. For example, Monero is completely anonymous in that case.
Okay, so in the case of Bitcoin, then it'd be sort of equivalent to somebody stealing your credit card information or something like that.
So it's more. It'll be more than that, though, wouldn't it? Because they would be able to see everything you've ever done, as well as.
All right.
Yeah.
There are two different keys which are important. There is the public key, and there is the private key. You can kind of visualize it in the way that the public key is basically your address where you send money to. So it's kind of like the bank account number, which is known to everybody, which you send to everybody. It's like, hey, give me money, and they send it there. The private key is more important because that's basically your bank account number plus your PIN. And once with your public key, you can actually run on-chain analysis, and you can see the transactions based on the public key. So that's actually pretty much known. Like if I were to disclose my public key, that can be easily tracked via like on-chain analysis. The private key is the one that basically allows you to make transactions, and that should be always kept very secret and secure, because otherwise you basically lose, quote unquote, like login data for that, and there is nobody to restore it, because there is no central actor who is basically keeping track of the login detail and be like, hey, I lost my password, all right, get another one. It's basically then it's game over.
Gotcha. So that ties into my next question, actually, which was just, are there, giant differences between the different types of crypto, and can you give us some examples? So you've already given us one in whether it's anonymous or not, but what are some other big differences people should be aware of?
There are different features. So for example, the limit on the amount of currency which can be created has a store of value. For that, Bitcoin is probably the poster child. For anonymity, there are some coins which do not have the problem that you can that you are transparent. You can look at this feature as a problem or a feature. I don't know. That really depends on what you try to do with it. Money. So anonymity is a big one, and the third one, which I see is currently is programmability. So Bitcoin right now is not really programmable. You cannot do a lot of the fancy stuff you can do with other blockchains with it. So for example, Ethereum is a blockchain which allows for smart contracts, for example. What that means is you make a contract. For example, I give you money at time, X, so pretty much now, and the money is automatically paid back at time, at some time in the future, which is also said and programmable, which is then set on the blockchain, and the money will be then there. You can do a lot of very interesting things with that allows, for example, for decentralized finance, that you do not need the intermediary of the banks, for example, but you can do that through a protocol which doesn't have any intermediaries in there.
Cool. I've heard a bit about stablecoins as well that try to sort of correct for that wildly fluctuating price that some like Bitcoin have. Do you think that sort of swinging value of Bitcoin is a problem? And do you have any thoughts on attempts to make more stablecoins?
The swing in value is very off-putting to casual, like to investors who do not have a long time horizon, who basically look at who will need the money on short notice. Because if your asset fluctuates, it could well do that like 10% a day. Then you worry about losing money in the event that you have to sell on short notice. So for stable coins, it's basically for holding your short-term crypto. It's also good to use as an on-ramp to other cryptocurrencies, because it's easier to trade crypto among each other, because you don't need to have this kind of bridge between the fiat world and the crypto world. that solves pretty well. You can basically exchange, for example, a USD stablecoin against US dollars very easily, and then you can hold your crypto and at the time when you need it, exchange it into other cryptocurrencies.
Right.
Okay. So we touched on this a little bit, but could we just maybe go a little bit more into detail about like some of the security risks and some of the ways that different crypto coins thing might be trying to deal with those? You know, like what happens? You already said with Bitcoin, you know, if somebody steals your private key, it's kind of game over. Are there similar risks with other cryptocurrencies, or what are the serious risks?
Yes. So losing your coins is a risk. Let me just list them a little bit. So you could lose your coins. The exchange can get hacked. Those are, in my opinion, the most striking risks, which are currently connected to holding crypto, but they can be mitigated. So there is what it's called hot storage and cold storage. It basically describes the way that you hold cryptocurrencies in wallets. So wallets are the thing that you hold cryptocurrencies in, and a hot wallet is a wallet that is connected to the internet. That would be, for example, MetaMask. And there are cold wallets which are completely disconnected from the internet. You can actually have like hardware wallets at times. Looks like a little USB stick, and you can store your cryptocurrencies on there. Those are very, very secure. Those are very safe compared to the hot wallets. While there is very, very little risk of blockchains actually being hacked due to what I just described, especially like Bitcoin has never been hacked, for example, because it has a very strong proof of work mechanism, but exchanges can be hacked. And those then, have a central point of failure, and those can be hacked. There might be some risk of the technical term is shitcoins. Shitcoins are basically coins which are created by certain individuals. They collect money, usually through an ICO, initial coin offering, collect a lot of fiat money, and then disappear with the money. That has been a thing, especially in the bull market days, but that is not really a feature of cryptocurrencies, like an exclusive feature of cryptocurrencies. It's just it's made very easy through this. So this is basically the risks that I see. But honestly, losing your coins is the most losing your keys, and therefore losing your coins is the most striking risk. There are some ways of going about this. One is going away from self-custody and just basically having an intermediary which stores your coins for you. That way you cannot lose it. So that's one way how people go about it. For example, if you look at institutional investors, they don't hold storage, they don't hold their keys themselves, usually. So yeah, that was the question. Like, what are the problems and how do we mitigate them? Right?
Yes, that was good.
So to pivot perhaps from sort of the negatives to the positives, like, do you see crypto being the future of sort of human value exchange? And if so, why? Like, what is it about it that makes you think that it's the way we should be going?
The answer is yes.
Thought it might be.
Yes, because so you have there will be different cryptocurrencies coming up in the future, which I do not have any idea of as of now, which will solve a lot of problems which we have in transacting value, storing value, and stuff like that. For just to see the benefits of cryptocurrencies, we also have to look at our current situation in the fiat system. If you look at the current fiat system, you have centralized actors, mostly the government and the central bank, which are on paper separated and independent, but it appears to be that they're not really that, and you have incentives on both sides to just work together very well. So there's this increase in money supply, and that leads to inflation. We can currently see that in the US a lot. The problem with that is that it harms the savers. It harms the normal citizens who try to make a living and try to save for retirement, for investment, for just going about their daily lives. The problem is that the government is constantly in a situation where it has debts, and they want to have the interest rates low, and this leads to a transfer of wealth from the savers to the borrowers. Yes, to the borrowers. It's basically done through the Cantillon effect. You guys know a little bit of economics there. So basically what it says is that if you ingest money into the monetary system, basically the entity which you give the money to first has a lot of increase in purchasing power and spends it. At one point, the entire system realized, okay, there is now more money in the system, but there's not more goods and services which you can buy with that. So in order to manage that disbalance, we're going to raise prices. In that way, it's now balanced again. However, the guys who had it before, had the money before the prices were adjusted, had a huge increase in purchasing power. The ones who basically who got reached by that money, it kind of just gets distributed and that kind of trickles everywhere down in the economy. Now those guys are pretty much it's pretty much neutral to them, because the money reached them and the purchasing power reached them at the same time that the prices get adjusted. But the ones down here, those are the ones who are screwed, because they have to deal with the higher price levels, although the increased purchasing power has not reached them yet. And therefore you have a wealth transfer of the ones who are most removed from the money injection towards the ones who have gotten the money first. And those actors here are usually governments and big investment banks and people who are able to access money very early. And this is the problem, right? There's a huge wealth transfer from the poor to the rich through that system. And by rich, I obviously mean the state. The state is the worst perpetrator of this.
And that transfer of wealth is and the sort of centralization of wealth in government hands is keeping money away from innovators as well, who would use it to create innovations that would enrich all of our lives. So exactly. I mean that could be one sense in which crypto is a benefit for liberty and human flourishing. And it does seem like it's one of those innovations that depends on liberty a lot. Like, government could wade in at any moment and, try and shut the whole thing down. So would you say it's, are there any other ways in which it would be an obvious benefit to liberty specifically?
It's censorship resistant. Like if you look at for example, the Canadian trucker protest, a lot of bank accounts, in terms of also in GoFundMe accounts, they had to, like, the money for there were people who were very willing to donate to these truckers, and they had to go through many centralized entities to reach them. And those centralized entities at one point said, well, we're not gonna, process this payment. So your money is basically gone. And GoFundMe actually didn't even do refunds at first. They basically kept the money and said, we're going to give it to something completely else, which was, it's a scandal in and of itself, right? Yeah. In a peer-to-peer network like Bitcoin, like most other blockchains, it's very unlikely that this happens. And it's actually impossible that this happens because you have no, like, there's no entity. If I want to send you money, I send you money. Like, that's it. We're done here. So this is the beautiful part about it. And it is very easy for us to, sit in the first world and be like, oh, I don't know, man, like bank transfers are very, very convenient. And why would anybody use this? Take a look in the second and third world, where first of all, money transfer is like across borders. It's not easy at all. That's one thing. And second of all, you have people putting a lot, like governments putting a lot of restrictions on the transfer of money. So that's, for example, if you go to Venezuela is currently in a country where there is what most consider hyperinflation. You have to be able to transfer your wealth into something which is a better dollar value than the bolivar is. For those people, and obviously, since everybody is seeking to do that, the Venezuelan government says we're not going to allow that. But in a peer-to-peer network, there is no allowing and not allowing. You cannot, it's very hard to shut down. The entire network is really hard to shut down. They can crack down on miners, maybe, but still the access to the network is still there. And that's also what I love about it. Like, if you do something your government does not like, then you can still keep doing that. And it's always, in the West, it's always very handy to say, well, my government looks out for me. But like, if you look at the very tyrannical governments, the more tyrannical governments in the second and third world, there is no denying that those are basically crooks. Mm-hmm. And you don't want crooks to be in control of your money.
Absolutely. So what would you say are your predictions for the next maybe couple of decades with crypto? Do you think, I mean, it's obviously still a process for people to kind of get on board, but what do you think that might look like in the coming years?
All right. So there will have to be a lot of innovation in terms of the interfaces, in terms of the usability of cryptocurrencies to break it into the mainstream. The technology is in of itself is awesome. There will be attempts to, I guess, shut it down by the government, but it seems to be that those are not futile. Yeah, futile is a big word, but yeah, they might be futile because of the nature of the system. This is so blockchain in and of itself will not die. Also, cryptocurrencies will not die, because if I use blockchain and cryptocurrencies, interchangeably, that's actually not, technically correct, because you can still do a lot more stuff with the blockchain technology than just having cryptocurrencies on there. So the technology will definitely survive, and there will be much more adoption in the market. I think the adoption will be first and foremost driven by very tech-savvy people in the first world, and also the quote-unquote normal people in the second and third world. If you look at countries like Nigeria, for example, you have a huge usership. Like the adoption is crazy over there, although it's forbidden. Now it's forbidden, but that doesn't change anything, because they know, all right, I want to have a store of value here, which is outside of the government system. So this is my prediction: is the technology will advance, the usability will advance, and we will have a increasing adoption. Obviously, this will go in waves. You always have a bull market and a bear market. Usually, that in terms of crypto, that goes in like 4-year cycles. We appear to be like we're in the beginning of a bear market for the next 4. We were in a bull market, but I mean, that's like, I don't have a crystal ball for that to tell you like what's going to be in the next 4 years even. But I'm very confident that after the next decades, there will be a steady increase in usership and adoption in of itself, and thus great increases in freedom.
You mentioned the other uses of blockchain, and you already talked about smart contracts. Is there any others you'd like to sort of highlight as other potential things that it could be used to do?
You could use the blockchain because we just touched upon the store of information and that you cannot change information on the blockchain in retrospect. So this is awesome for tracking and tracing products along a supply chain. Let's look at, for example, diamonds. Diamonds have a problem that some diamonds are sourced unethically, which are called blood diamonds. If you have, and basically then you have a problem of breaking down diamonds, breaking down blood diamonds, and basically saying like, this is a completely normal diamond. Like, and usually people don't want to hold those. And what you can do is you can tokenize. So basically, make like a digital copy of the diamond on a blockchain and connect it with a certificate of being ethically sourced. And then you can always, with each transaction of this diamond, you can transfer the token with it, and it serves as a certificate of of being sourced ethically. That's one way of doing that. And then you can go ahead and do all kinds of fun stuff with it in terms of ESG requirements. So you can track how much CO2 was used in the process of creating a product, because then you can connect that the product with a token on the blockchain. There's a lot of stuff which can go on. Tokenization in of itself, you can also tokenize property rights. You have a very like illiquid asset, for example, which cannot be transported across borders, for example. And if you are able to tokenize this asset and basically establish that once the token changes the owner, the entire asset itself changes the owner, then you have a lot more flexibility than what you currently have.
Awesome.
Another question. So if somebody has never invested in cryptocurrency but wants to start, how might they go about that, and what suggestions would you have for them?
Noting that you're not giving investment advice.
Not investment advice, just general, like, technical. Right. What should they look for?
Always everybody has to say that I'm not a financial advisor.
Do your own research.
So yeah, and that leads me to the first point of it. Just do your research beforehand. Look into what you also want to do with it. Like, look into the cryptocurrency that you want to invest in. Do it based on the features that you want, and then look at, okay, how do I basically how do I go about my investment? If you, for example, want to go into a Bitcoin investment, you want to leave it basically in your wallet for eternity, because you believe in the long-term value of the asset, then you have to invest differently, and you have to also store differently than if you just want to hold it for a couple of days, weeks, also if you don't want to do purchases with it. So do that. There's a lot of free information on it on YouTube, for example. YouTube is a great source of information just to get started, and also talk to your friends. There's always this one guy or gal which has already invested, and they can look over your shoulder and say like, yeah, this is how you might do it. This is, for example, the exchange I use. This is also the exchange I specifically don't use. So that's kind of how you should go about it. And I have no affiliation with a YouTube channel, but the Coin Bureau is a really good channel. So they might that's definitely worth checking out.
We'll put a link to that in the description. Thank you. Did you have any other questions?
No, I think I'm mostly good.
All right. Is there anything else you want to say about crypto, Felix?
Not much, which is different to what I already said. I think it's a technology which has huge potential for freedom and human flourishing. look it up how you can get into it yourself. If you want to get into it, there are certain risks to connected to it, but once you figure that out, it's a great tool towards taking your life into your own hands and also taking your money into your own hands.
Awesome. Thank you. So final question then. We mentioned your podcast at the beginning, Crypto Calling. Is there anywhere else you would like to direct people to find more of your work?
So I'm on LinkedIn. There is also the website of the nonprofit that I co-founded, which is called Berlin Center for Individualist Thought. You can visit us at bcit.berlin. We're based in Berlin, Germany. And yeah, we fight for freedom there every day.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.